Good morning. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Thanks for hanging out with us. Lovely to have you guys here. Lucas and myself are with you until 1 o'clock. We got Titans on the field at about 11:45 today. Practice for OTAs underway. The second week of OTAs, to be specific, and we're going to talk about the position groups that we are most interested in watching. 615-737-1045 is the number. 11 o'clock, dumbest thing in sports. Make sure you bring your nominees. Good morning, bud. How are we?
Good morning.
What are you most excited to see at OTAs? Is anything tickling your fancy as of late? We were talking about it this morning. I asked Lucas, all right, we got OTAs today. What can we talk about from OTAs last week that's different this week? And you said to me what?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing was the answer.
Who will we see next level stuff from at OTAs?
God.
No, it's more about who we hear from. I mean, I feel like those are the most interesting things to come out of OTAs.
Sure. For example, we have heard precious little from Caleb Farley, who is not a young player. In fact, he at this stage of his career would be considered a vet. Think about that. Caleb Farley's heading into year 3 on this Tennessee Titans roster. We haven't heard much from him. Haven't spent a lot of time talking to a couple of key pieces on this defense, for example. Danico Autry is a man of few words anyway, but I'd be curious to talk to Danico. At this point, it's just about catching up with dudes who you haven't heard from in a long time, as opposed to what's happening on the practice field. But like yesterday, right? I'm doing my Q&As. And somebody asked me, how's Will Levis look under pressure? And I had to explain to him, well,
I don't know.
I mean, I can cite for you examples from his career at Kentucky how he looks under pressure, but based on the amount of rush that he is seeing on the practice field in nothing but, helmet, shirts, and shorts, he's not getting a lot of pressure right now. And by the way, he's not taking a lot of snaps. That's the thing that you have to remember, especially for that dude, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions about all three of the quarterbacks. Probably more so about the younger ones. But with Malik and Levis at the top of a lot of people's minds, and, of course, we'll talk about the secondary. We'll talk about the places where they do have depth and where they more specifically don't have depth and how all those things might start to be addressed the more waiver transactions that you see. I think the thing that I keep coming back to with, Levis and Malik, for example, when people ask me how they look out there, it's hard for me to not say, great, both of them. They both look exceptional. You know why? Because they're not facing defenses, really. They're not doing much beyond going through individual drills, and they're doing some teamwork, and there's no offensive line play, really. There's no defensive line play, really. They're just kind of getting in their stances and walking through it, jogging through it. But, I can't tell you what the offensive line's going to look like. Can't tell you what the defensive line's going to look like. Can't tell you what the running game is going to look like because they're not wearing pads. So anytime people ask me what players look like out on the practice field at this time of year, I'm like, great. They look like professional athletes. Turns out Malik Willis still has a cannon. The accuracy stuff, the decisiveness, yeah, there's some reason to believe that that's still a work in progress. But, he looks like a professional athlete out there.
Because he is.
He is. He's actually a professional athlete. That is factually correct. But what can we learn? And what positions haven't we talked a great deal about? And I would say I come back to the secondary an awful lot. Now, this was, preseason lists, okay? And I think we, as a unit, have established how we feel about preseason lists. But as you go through these things and as you read stuff like this, right, Mike Clay's positional group rankings, the Titans wide receiver group ranked 32nd. Among them, their defensive line group, I think, was in the top 15, for example. And the cornerbacks were 20th, specifically the cornerbacks, not counting the safeties in this group. But of the Titans' corners, would you say that there is a proven commodity among them? Who is the most proven commodity among the Titans' cornerback group? Because it's still a really, really young unit. Fulton is, I guess Murphy Bunting or Fulton would probably be neck and neck for the most seniority in that room at this point, right? I'm not leaving off a veteran that they signed that's escaping me at this point, that's older than Christian Fulton on their roster. Roger McCreary's heading into year 2. He's probably their best corner from last season. Just because he was out there, he was available, he played the vast majority of the snaps. Murphy Bunting is somebody who's 25 years old, who's got decent draft pedigree and who's been on a Super Bowl champion before. And he is somebody who was looking for work on a 1-year prove-it deal, found an opportunity here because, even the Titans are telling you, our cornerbacks, for as much draft capital as we've invested in them, still not a group that's proven very much at all. Now, you can talk about 32nd ranked passing defense, and that's factually accurate. They gave up more passing yards than any team in football last year. That's because teams were very much happy to not run on them or tried to run on them and were not able because of the way that they suffocated it. So they just went through the air, and at times the pass rush was able to stop that. At times it was not. At times the secondary was healthy and held up. At times it was very much not. So it resulted in the worst passing defense in football last year. I have a tough time saying that Christian Fulton is a proven commodity among this group because I think I know what Christian Fulton is capable of. He's just not out there enough for me. It's not like Bud Dupree to that extent, but he's definitely missed enough time. And then there's the comments. Do you have the comments from Mike Vrabel when he was asked about guys who were not in attendance at OTAs in the first week? Now, we don't know whether Christian Fulton or Kevin Byard, for example, are out there today or yesterday because today's practice is the first one that's open to media. But Mike Vrabel was asked about 2 situations. He asked first about Kevin Byard, second about Christian Fulton. See if you can spot a difference in the way that he answers these.
Yeah, saw him at the golf course on Sunday. Looks great. Had a great conversation. So that was fun.
Expect him to be here at OTAs?
I would expect him at some point in time, yeah.
How about Christian Fulton? Coach, is he here? Or?
Nope.
Okay.
So am I making too much of it? Why are you smiling back there?
Nope.
So you think that Mike Vrabel is differentiating in the brevity of the second answer between saw KB, had a great discussion. He mentioned earlier, not in that answer, but that Kevin Byard had been doing Zoom calls with the safeties coach, Scott Booker. So he's not physically present, but he's still actively involved and engaged versus the response that he gave when asked about Fulton. You don't think he was just being direct? You think there's more meaning that we're not seeing there?
I mean, think about the last time we heard Mike Vrabel talk about either of those guys, right? In the same soundbite. What was it? It was, hey, Kevin Byard, knock on wood, hasn't pulled a hammy since he's been here. And then he called Christian Fulton, almost in the same breath, a repeat offender. Who has more to prove than Kevin Byard?
A repeat offender is such a great phrase for him to use.
That's the phrase he used.
No, I know. It's the one that pissed David Long off. It's probably why. I don't think Christian Fulton is terribly happy about the way that his situation has been discussed. He's not outwardly voicing that, but he can't be pleased.
And Mike Vrabel's talked about, hey, listen, I miss voluntary workouts from time to time as a player in New England. But you got to build up some equity, right? I feel like Vrabel's the type of coach that, you can miss voluntary workouts, but you have to have some equity built up to be able to have the privilege to do that. And Kevin Byard is one of those people. Derrick Henry, even though I know he was out there last week, is one of those people. Is Christian Fulton one of those guys yet?
Not according to Mike Vrabel.
In the eyes of Mike Vrabel, Christian Fulton doesn't have to be there. It's voluntary. But
sure
in
doesn't.
the eyes of Mike Vrabel, has he built up enough equity to afford missing voluntary OTAs?
All right, I'm not going to make the mistake of answering for Mike Vrabel because then the next time I'm in a press conference, I can feel it. I can feel it in my soul. You remember when he got Ben Arthur on a Zoom call? It was a Des Fitzpatrick question. I think Ben phrased something slightly different than the way that Mike phrased it. It's just, oh, God, I still get chills thinking about that press conference. But I will not say how Mike Vrabel views Christian Fulton specifically because I don't have the answer to that question. Mike does. But I will say that the answers when asked about Christian Fulton do not seem to indicate that they are people who are held in the same regard. Now, that's not going to shock anybody, right? There's a big difference between what Kevin Byard has accomplished as a player and what Christian Fulton, who is he is the saving grace of that 2020 draft class at this point. And even he has been, I think he is, it's not like I think he's a bad player. I think Christian Fulton's a really good player. I just think that the time that he's missed, but holding him up against the other members of his 2020 draft class, I think he looks leaps and bounds better than anybody from that class because, it's guys like Isaiah Wilson and Darrington Evans.
By the way, the answer to your question is Sean Murphy Bunting on the most proven commodity at corner in this Titans cornerback room. Right?
Yeah.
It has to be.
Probably.
He's the most experienced guy in what is a young room.
They are really, really young.
Yeah.
And think about the amount of draft capital that is invested. So Farley's the only first-round pick. And we'll talk about Caleb Farley later in the show. The second-round picks are who? It's Christian Fulton. It's Roger McCreary. Murphy Bunting is a third-round pick, or I believe he's a second-round pick.
I thought he was a third. I'll look it up. I thought he was a third out of Central Michigan.
So either way, you've got a first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, Murphy Bunting.
You're right. He was a second.
Who is a second-round pick. So 3 second-round picks, and then Molden, who apparently is going to spend time both at corner when needed and at safety when needed.
Third-round pick.
Third-round pick. Top 100 pick. That's a ton of draft capital to not know very much about this secondary at all and to still be adding pieces like Sean Murphy Bunting because even they're not sure. That's probably one of the biggest focuses for me at this time of year because, we're basically watching 7-on-7. So understanding that there's no pass rush out there to help the defense, that those drills inherently favor the offense, I feel like there's a lot that I need to learn about this Titan secondary and to not make the mistakes that I did in training camp, for example, which is thinking that Racey McMath might be a breakout player while not realizing that Caleb Farley is the player in coverage, and that's what's making Racey look infinitely better than we otherwise might have thought him to be. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the most interesting storylines coming out of OTAs around the league. We've got SEC observations. Don't forget at 1045. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. Titans OTAs, they are on the field at noon today. Coordinators, well, no, not coordinators, position coaches are going to be speaking to the media. That's not something that's live streamed, and it's kind of a cluster. If you don't know how those things work, they just kind of release all of them at once and then let us vultures scurry around to the various coaches, largely asking them the same questions, which is not, I guess, I mean, it's probably the most efficient way to do something like that. But a couple of new position coaches who I am curious to hear from, so we'll await some Twitter video because I know my colleagues are out there at 11 o'clock before practice. Chris Harris, the new defensive backs coach, is somebody who is going to be, I think, very much involved in what this defense is. Now, obviously, every member of the defensive staff is involved in what the defense is. But that dude's got Kerry Coombs energy, and that's a change of pace from what they've had in the last couple of years with Anthony Midget. They felt it necessary to make a change. I don't know why they felt it necessary to make a change, but that was so you remember the accusation of Vrabel just hires his boys?
Yeah.
Anthony Midget, one of his boys. Anthony Midget lasted 2 years here. So I think there is, a willingness to try guys that he's worked with before, and also a willingness to move on from guys that he's worked with before. Whether that be Kerry Coombs, who obviously I think he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State, which was obviously a promotion. That didn't last very long. He got pretty summarily run out of that job in Columbus. But Chris Harris, who's been out there, who's been active, who is the defensive pass game coordinator. So it's not just a defensive backs coach, but he's got an additional title to that and was looked at, remember, didn't officially take this job because he was still being looked at for DC positions and openings across the league until kind of late in the process. So something to keep an eye on when assistants meet with the media today. Most interesting storylines in OTAs elsewhere in the league. The Aaron Rodgers thing is so exhaustive, constantly. I'm getting Fox Sports updates. You, by the way, I'm mad at you for having me download that Fox Sports app for the World Cup, because now all it does is send me notifications about how much fun Aaron Rodgers is having at the Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah, so that is by far the team that is generating the most headlines, right?
Yeah.
With OTAs.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially because he got hurt. He got hurt in the one day that media was out there. Apparently,
calf strain.
Apparently, he's back out there today. Yeah, he had a calf strain. Rodgers had a calf strain, and apparently Alan Lazard got racked, shall we say, and was experiencing some groin issues, for lack of a better term, or in that area. But I think that Aaron Rodgers has taken up the most air of any other story out there in NFL media. But, I'm noticing some of and I just happen to be strolling through Pro Football Talk yesterday to come up with different ideas for this segment. But, Deshaun Watson is talking about the idea of reuniting with DeAndre Hopkins. And the idea that Deshaun Watson, for all the different off-the-field discussions, is getting ready to go through his first full-time season with the Cleveland Browns. That division is a very, very competitive one. Even as the Steelers look like they should be the fourth team out of four, they still found ways to win 9 games last year, and I want to see what Kenny Pickett is going to look like in year 2. The quarterback situation in the AFC North is as interesting as the quarterback situation in this division. To be honest with you, it's just in a different phase. Lamar just got paid. Burrow's in a contract year, or can very easily make this a contract year. In all likelihood, they will get a new deal done with him. You have Kenny Pickett in year 2, who is, ascending, but the question is, what is his ceiling? How high a level of a quarterback is he actually? And does that remain to be seen? And then there's, Watson, who was the biggest story in sports for basically 2 years. And now he's just relegated to a Pro Football Talk byline now that he's playing actual football. Obviously, he was compelling news for a great many reasons other than football. But now we actually get to see whether he's worth a damn at football, because when last I saw him play, he was not very good. Rodgers probably the answer, just in terms of interest level everywhere, across the football-consuming public. I'm trying to figure out what would be second.
What's a bigger failure? Aaron Rodgers crashing and burning with the Jets, or if Deshaun Watson crashes and burns with the Browns?
Rodgers.
It's Rodgers still.
Rodgers.
Despite the money that they gave Deshaun Watson.
Rodgers. He's in New York. He's the savior. It's the Jets. The Jets fans are crazed. They're all over. And by the way, it doesn't hurt.
We'll definitely be talking more about Rodgers, but does that make it the biggest failure? If both of those things were to happen?
That's one of those things where I think the people discussing the story can dictate the narrative on that. Think about how many Jets fans are on national television. Mike Greenberg is a diehard Jets fan. Every time you turn on ESPN for Get Up, he is talking about the Jets, right? Hell, look at ESPN's lineup. Bart Scott, former Jets linebacker. Rex Ryan, former Jets head coach. Like, the Jets are everywhere, all over the sports media landscape. And so I think that dictates as much as the coverage for people who complain about not enough Titans, right? Who's the most famous Titan on a national platform right now? Is it McCourty on Good Morning Football?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like in the media?
Like who would you, yeah. Like who of former Titans players is the most visible member?
Maybe Harry Douglas.
Harry's got a lot. Harry does First Take now. Harry's got his own radio show.
I was watching him this morning talking to Greenberg on Get Up about the Jets and Aaron Rodgers.
But I don't think people associate Harry, and Harry obviously does have Tennessee Titans ties. He ended his career here. But like Harry Douglas, to me, is a Falcon, right? Jason McCourty is a Titan, even though he won Super Bowls elsewhere. And that's probably going to be the teams that more people associate him with because they saw him win Super Bowls with New England. And there were some decent years in Tennessee, but for the most part, they were a losing franchise while he was here. So I think just by nature of how many former Jets or Jets fans are on television talking about the Jets, I think that it causes as much as a stir as anything. And the fact that Rodgers is who he is always going to be polarizing. Lamar, you didn't include Lamar in that equation. Like Rodgers failing with the Jets. What's Rodgers failing with anything less than a Super Bowl feels like a failure. We're grading these things on by different standards, right?
I mean, the Jets missing out on the postseason would obviously be just an abject disaster. I think anything less of a playoff win, at least getting to the divisional round, would be a failure. I don't know that you could sit here and say if the Jets don't win a Super Bowl, then everything, the Aaron Rodgers, I guess there's a lot of Jets fans that would say that. That's already the expectation. But
I think they need to be in the AFC Championship game. Like, I think they need to be in it, whether they win it or lose it. Like, I think they need to be a game within the Super Bowl for this to have been considered a success. Like, I think if they have a divisional round exit, I think he's buried.
A bigger failure, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets not reaching the AFC Championship game, or the Browns missing out on the playoffs?
Browns just signed Sedarius Smith. They didn't really do much in free agency beyond that.
It's the Browns. They're locked into one of the biggest guaranteed contract in NFL history.
But nobody expects them to win anything. Like, that's the thing. Deshaun Watson, and maybe I'm thinking about this differently, but like, I associate that franchise as nothing but loser and malpractice. That I have zero expectations for them to do any winning of consequence, regardless of the talent on the field. They've had plenty of talent. The Browns have had plenty of talent for the last. I mean, think about this. All right, so when was the Browns Super Bowl hype? Where they're the discussion of everything, right? With Baker Mayfield, first overall pick, when they trade for Odell, what is that? 19?
When the Titans play them in week 1?
And kick their asses.
Yeah, I think that was 19.
Like, Delaney Walker walked into that locker room with us afterwards and said, they are who we thought they were. Like, proudly, with his chest. And at the time, the Titans did not have an easy go of it in the early portion of 2019, but like, they put it on the Browns. Super Bowl Browns, right? Browns didn't even make the postseason that year, if I recall. They did end up winning a playoff game with Baker Mayfield over a wounded duck, a lame duck Steelers team, it felt like. But like, that was the height of the Browns for all the talent, all the different players that they've had. And they've been mismanaged by ownership, and they've been mismanaged by coaching, Freddie Kitchens and things like that. So even though they have a ridiculous quarterback contract and a player who we associate, not based off last year, but whose career we associate being a good football player, a top 10 quarterback by any stretch of the imagination with his career, right? Watson, Not based off last season. He was not. I mean, Jacoby Brissett was a better quarterback than Watson was last year.
Yeah, at his best, but that hasn't happened in over 2 years.
And we haven't seen it, right? He hasn't played football. We saw a small sample size last year, and what we saw was pretty ugly. So I would say that I associate the Browns with nothing but being a loser franchise. And that, they until such, and maybe it's a flawed way to do the analysis, because I'm sure a lot of people look at the Titans as a loser franchise, even though the Titans have had playoff success recently. They've had a hell of a lot more than the Browns. Although I think that Mike Vrabel has turned a lot of that, and the teams under Mike Vrabel have turned a lot of that to where they're no longer thought of as, what's the word that I'm looking for? Poverty franchise, right? They're thought of as tough, competitive, that they're always going to cause you problems, that Mike Vrabel lives for overtime and things of that nature just because he likes the rush, right? They play in these games that they have no business playing, and then, you put them in a game with big spots, and a lot of times they'll let you down. So I think, the Jags. The Jags are another one. But I don't feel as strongly about the Jags, even though the Jags have done just as much losing as the Browns, maybe a little more winning than the Browns in the last couple of years. I just don't have any expectation for that franchise. So Deshaun Watson is such an afterthought to me as far as quarterback expectations. And you're right, I should absolutely hold him to the same standard that I do Lamar, Rodgers, Burrow, what we're going to see. Justin Herbert. I want to see a hell of a lot more from Justin Herbert. I have way higher expectations for Justin Herbert, and that dude hadn't done bleep at all other than be the quarterback for one of the most epic playoff collapses for a franchise that is historically a part of epic collapses in the Chargers. Quarterbacks are always going to be the storylines, right? Because Lucas made a joke earlier about Anthony Richardson and next level stuff at Colts OTAs, which could mean taking snaps under center or whatever, the most minuscule next level quarterback play possible. And when a coach says it, it's different than what the headline reads. Is there a non-quarterback storyline? I guess it's DeAndre Hopkins.
It's DeAndre Hopkins.
And he's not on a roster. So I guess that's not necessarily a storyline coming out of OTAs. I'd probably say it's Baltimore. Baltimore has all kind of expectations. And I honestly think that's a bit unfair. Because OBJ, I don't think of Odell Beckham Jr. in the same way that Odell Beckham Jr. is talked about. And I think that a lot of people are looking around at Baltimore with all the different moves that they've made, including signing Lamar, and saying, yeah, that's a team that should absolutely be able to elevate themselves. And I don't know if it gets better for them than it did the year that they were the number one overall seed and the Titans upset them. There's so much randomness involved in this stuff, and we're sitting here trying to do, OTA prognostications, I guess. But I guess the most interesting storyline, there's a couple to choose from, but it all seems to revolve back to quarterback, doesn't it? Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Geno Smith in year 2. Is that replicable in what he's able to accomplish? Is Pete Carroll going to be proven right because they gambled on the quarterback that everybody wrote off, but he didn't write back?
So we put it to a poll, the most interesting OTA storyline in the NFL outside of the Titans, and we had multiple people. Kenneth, Kane fan, saying Jimmy G. What happens with the Raiders and Jimmy G with his foot?
So we talked about this yesterday, and it was just made mention of, we did it during Oh No, right? And just to refresh the conversation for those of you guys who missed it, Garoppolo signed with the Raiders this past offseason, or I guess this offseason, has a foot injury that the team was comfortable still allowing him to agree to terms, but that he signed a waiver type situation that basically removes any burden of the team if he can't play to an extent, right? If he's not available for the start of the season, there are things that come into place, and I don't have the exact contract, or I don't have access to the contract, so I can't give you exact language, but there are stipulations in place that put a lot of the burden on Jimmy Garoppolo to get the hell out there and play football, or else he's not making anywhere close to the money that contract looked like he might have been making to be the Raiders' stopgap on a 3-year contract.
Yeah, if the foot issue lingers, they can get out of it basically with no penalty.
Right.
They had to sign a waiver. They had to rework his contract after he failed the physical.
Which one makes the Raiders, I think, look silly because it's a gamble that you're making on a quarterback market where you don't have a solution. I mean, we talked about this last night on Primetime because Bert came up with the idea of, okay, well, what if this is another Tannehill trade scenario? And could this be the last option with DeAndre Hopkins lingering out there and the Raiders looking like, and again, we're talking about this on May 31st. They don't play football until the second week of September. So it's entirely possible that Jimmy Garoppolo's foot is fine by the second week of September. But is there a Hail Mary trade scenario where Jimmy Garoppolo's foot voids him out of his contract and the Raiders are left looking around like dopes post-June 1 for a quarterback situation to where they have to make an above-market value offer for a player like Ryan Tannehill on an expiring deal? Because at that point, theoretically, the Jimmy G money would be freed up. Hell, I wonder if Jimmy would have to give money back. Like, I wonder if there's something stipulating in that signing bonus. That's what I'm most curious about. How much of that money he's already been given does that waiver apply to? Or is there a degree of cash that Jimmy Garoppolo is already making, even though he's not able to participate in OTAs? 615-737-1045 is the number. We're going to get into some SEC observations. Obviously, spring meetings going on in Destin right now. Quick reminder, though, we're throwing a party June the 22nd. It's going to be a banger. It's the second annual Split Happens bowling event. This year's charity is Home Street Home, the great charity run by Stephen Young and his lovely wife, Andy, who make the lives of the homeless community here in Middle Tennessee a lot easier. They help with volunteer work. They help with providing resources, with providing materials, food, water, tents, heaters, all the things that we take for granted. Home Street Home is out there doing the real work. So we're throwing a party at Kings Bowl on June the 22nd to benefit Home Street Home. We want you guys to come hang out. It was a great time last year. We sold it out. We think we can do the exact same this year. We got a bigger venue, and we got more tickets to sell because there was demand last year for that. So we're very, very happy to have you guguys out there. 1045thezone.com is where you go to get those tickets and to come hang out with us on a really, really fun night at Kings Bowl in Franklin, Thursday, June the 22nd. Tickets available, like I said, at 1045thezone.com. SEC observations, they're next. I am so happy right now. I just went to the break room to get a cup of coffee. We're going to do the SEC observations here in just a second. When I was walking back into the studio, many of you have been clamoring for Bert to be relieved of his suspension. I have refused that request. Bert tried to jump scare me. We've not allowed him near a microphone on this show. What was that, Thursday? When he almost sent us all into the sun collectively? He tried to jump scare me because I won't let him on the microphone. I heard he's been creeping onto the morning show. I heard he's been waking up just to get the airtime that he now so desperately craves. He tried to jump scare me, and it didn't work. It was a great victory.
Is that your account of it, or is that what happened?
Well, he's here. He's been banished. Is this the time that we remove the suspension? You might have to go get him because I think he was very dismayed by his lack of effect on me today. Because I swear to God, he was hiding in a production studio. I went to get my coffee. He jump scared me, and I just looked at him. You don't scare me at all.
He's losing his fastball. His Irish goodbyes are getting worse. Now he can't successfully jump scare you.
We've taken his superpower away, which is his ability to completely disrupt this thing on a regular basis. But perhaps we'll have him tell his own account of his failed jump scare later on. Meanwhile, SEC observation.
Yeah, speaking of Robert.
Let's talk about SEC, baby. Let's talk about the SEC. Let's talk about Nick Saban and Josh Heupel in the SEC. Let's talk about SEC, baby. Let's talk about the SEC. Let's talk about Brian Kelly and Greg Sankey in the SEC. Let's talk about SEC.
So that intro from Robert is appropriate because SEC head coaches are speaking with the media down in Destin at SEC spring meetings, particularly Nick Saban and Kirby Smart on the hot topic this week, the discussion between an 8 or a 9-game SEC regular season moving forward when the league goes up to 16 teams with Oklahoma and Texas in the fold.
The thing that had you absolutely disgusted yesterday with Coach Doug Matthews.
That's right. And I'm not just going to keep using this over and over because this probably is my dumbest thing in sports this week, but I'll try to get more creative than that. But Nick Saban, speaking with the media, was asked about if he still favors the 9-game SEC schedule because we will remember Nick Saban for years has been clamoring for a 9-game SEC schedule. He said, I think whatever happens, happens. I think there's so many things that probably sort of go into this in terms of 8 games versus 9 games, including TV contracts, things that are way beyond my scope of visibility. I'm still always of the opinion we should play all Division I games. I've said this for years. He goes on to say, I think one of the more difficult things with going to 9 games is we've tried to schedule 2 out-of-conference Power 5 games to try to improve our strength of schedule. Over the next, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and if we go to 9 games, we will have to unwind that. So my deal was always play more SEC games because we couldn't get other people to schedule. So now I think there's more people in tune to scheduling, so having a balance is probably the most important thing. Going back and forth here, Nick Saban.
I mean, Nick Saban is fence sitter. If this was politics, he'd be called a flip-flopper. Wasn't that what was? I'm trying to think of the presidential election where the worst insult being hurled was flip-flopper. I think that was John Kerry, if I remember correctly. Couldn't take a position on anything. Flip-flopper. So now that's Nick Saban.
Yeah, so his argument is, well, we've been trying to schedule Power 5 out-of-conference games for years to improve our strength of schedule. So we don't want to go to 9 games because now more out-of-conference Power 5 teams are agreeing to schedule games with us. So we got to find this balance. Well, if your whole thing is about strength of schedule, what better strength of schedule than a 9-game SEC slate? But your quote a few weeks ago, Nick Saban, was, well, they're giving us Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. I don't know how they came to that. And now suddenly it's sounding like Alabama may be wavering towards the 8-game format. So which is it? Do you want a better strength of schedule or do you not? Because if you do, which you have said yesterday and for years, then you should support a 9-game SEC schedule.
He's going to get more public applause for supporting a 9-game schedule. He's going to benefit himself and his program more by advocating for 8. So while I understand why he might, and I think that just as Nick Saban or just as any of us are allowed to adapt our opinions when new information becomes available, I think that Nick Saban should also be afforded that, but he can't continue to waver on this thing. People pay too close attention to his words. I mean, he can do whatever he wants in this situation. Ultimately, it's the athletic directors who are voting on this who have the say-so, right? I mean, Nick Saban obviously has influence. Presidents
will vote.
So, yeah, as the highest paid employee in their respective states, other than Vanderbilt, who is a private institution, the football coach is going to have some sway on what the school president ultimately ends up voting. But I do think that Nick Saban is going to put himself in a tough position, if he even cares about that stuff, because I understand why he's wavering. I understand the benefits of backing both. I think ultimately what he's going to side on is the thing that benefits his football team the most, which is 8.
And then Kirby Smart seems to be pretty tired of this discussion between 8 and 9 regular season games in the SEC. He called it the most overrated conversation in the world. Kirby said, 4 years, you will play everybody home and away because of the new format, regardless of if it's 8 or 9. It's doing away with divisions. Divisions make it to where you can go several years without playing one particular team. If you're an SEC East team, if you're Tennessee, Tennessee almost never plays Texas A&M, right? Tennessee hardly ever. Tennessee has played Mississippi State like once in the last, 8, 9 years.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of last Tennessee-Texas A&M game.
It was 2020. It was the COVID year, which was obviously, a special exception because it was 10 nothing but conference games.
Right.
So Kirby Smart says, 4 years, you will play everybody, home and away. I get the traditional rivalries. You have 3, you have 2, you have 1, you have this, you have that. You guys need something to write about bad when you start talking about this. So Kirby basically saying, it's not a big deal, guys. Hey, I get it. Auburn, Georgia, oldest rivalry in the South. I grew up watching it. It's a huge deal. We're still going to get to play them every other year. I hate that as an SEC fan. I don't want to have to wait 2 years to watch Georgia and Auburn play each other. I'm just tired of the narrative coming out from SEC head coaches trying to find every reason why they should stick to 8 games, which I get could be better for their football team in the long run when it comes to strength of schedule, when it comes to getting into the playoff, for seeding, bowl eligibility, wherever you stand on it. But the big bad SEC that wants to be at the forefront of college football.
Look at you spitting mad.
Like Greg Sankey is talking about. Greg Sankey is clearly on the side of the 9-game schedule because it is so clearly the right decision for the conference. He is the commissioner of the SEC. His responsibility is not one football team. It's the entire conference. So it makes sense why he is siding with 9 games. It also makes sense why some head coaches are siding with 8 games if it is better for them and their long-term job security and them winning football games. But the big bad SEC that wants to be at the forefront of college football is really going to be the only power conference with 16 or more teams that has an 8-game conference slate. Everybody else is going to be doing 9.
Why are you yelling at me?
Stop. This is how I talk. So I am just tired of this fence sitting from SEC head coaches when everybody in the room knows what the right decision is for the conference, for the fans, and it feels like we are trending towards either not having a vote again or building in that 8 SEC game regular season stopgap for 2024 and then revisiting it later.
I think it's more likely we don't have a vote than that they do something and then have to reevaluate it, right? Based on Sankey's comments. I mean, I think Sankey is, at least reading it the way that I've read it and the way that we've talked about it, it does seem like Sankey is messaging 9 conference games.
And he wants to get it done. He wants to get the vote done, you can tell. And I applaud someone like Brian Kelly, LSU head coach, who's asked, would you want to play Bama every year? He said, yes. Heck yes. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I wish we had more of that mentality from SEC head coaches, not Kentucky, who would rather have an 8-game slate so they have a better shot at bowl eligibility.
Well, what's the difference? What's the difference between Mark Stoops and Brian Kelly? Mark Stoops been doing this a lot longer. He knows how hard this is, and Brian Kelly just got here, and he's having a great time. His first season was a success. They won the SEC West, for God's sake.
I know. But Kentucky's argument is, well, we already have that 9th power conference game with our Louisville rivalry. Yes, the fact that you have to play Louisville every year. I'm so sorry about that.
No, but I mean, you can understand that, right? If you're Mark Stoops versus Brian Kelly. Now, I don't know if this is specifically what they're feeling, But I could completely understand Mark Stoops looking around being like, yeah, I've done this SEC league plenty. Make whatever helps me keep this thing in the best contention humanly possible, sold. Whereas Brian Kelly is coming in like, oh, this is a breeze. Maybe not a breeze. This is way better than I thought it was going to be. We had a couple of bumps early on in the season. Came out looking great. I've got a great team. Let's ride.
I cannot reconcile with the idea of impeding the progress of the conference being at the forefront of college football like they like to claim to be because certain member institutions are worried about their opportunity to go to the Bad Boy Mowers Bowl or whatever the hell it would be. I mean, it's ridiculous. Let's figure this out. Let's establish a 9-game slate. We have Oklahoma and Texas coming. By the way, they just renewed their deal with the Cotton Bowl to play the Red River rivalry there every single year. So I guess you're already, if you have an 8-game schedule, you're already saddling Oklahoma and Texas with one another, which is fine. That makes sense. But guess we don't have Texas A&M Texas anymore. That would probably be the case with the 9-game schedule and 3 fixed opponents where Texas would play Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Everybody would want to see that every single year. But because Kentucky wants to make sure they can get into the Birmingham Bowl on a year where they're not going to be 8-4, we have to be held back from that. No, I cannot reconcile with that. Make the right damn decision.
It all comes back to Kentucky for you, doesn't it?
Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, whoever. And I'll applaud Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz, who has publicly supported the 9-game format when you would think they would definitely be in the boat of 8 games because that would be better for a Missouri program that has not gotten over the 6-6 hump in quite a while.
Now, wait, slow down. Make this less about the football because I know we have to break here. I know we got the dumbest thing in sports, and make sure you have your nominee, 615-737-1045. What's the dumbest thing in sports this week? We'll do it next. What about this? Again, the financial element of it. How much is ESPN looking around and saying, we're not contractually obligated to give you more money?
Yeah, we don't have to give you more for 9 games.
And the league is looking around and saying, well, if we're not going to make more money off of it from a television standpoint, why do it? That, I think, because Doug Matthews said something yesterday about the money not having as big an impact as we think it does. And I'm certainly more inclined to listen to Coach Matthews on those things because he is far more connected and far more informed about that world than I am. And he speaks to a hell of a lot more people on that level. But damned if that doesn't have something to do with it, the fact that the SEC wouldn't make a dime more or isn't contractually obligated to get a dime more by playing an extra conference game. I have to think that is as big a factor in any of this.
I know, but the fact that there will be some schools out there that are getting their $70 million a year, just like in Alabama without pulling nearly as much weight, would have the audacity to say, well, no, only if we get more money will we agree to that. No, get out of here with that. Greg Sankey, come on. Twist some arms here.
Are you doing the dumbest thing in sports early?
Yeah, I guess I am.
Okay.
Greg Sankey's the most powerful man in college football. Get this done.
We'll do the real one next.
It is 11:04. Good morning from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Nashville Predators will officially announce new head coach Andrew Brunette this afternoon in a press conference at 1 p.m. Barry Trotz, David Poyle, and Brunette will be in attendance. The hire of Brunette to replace John Hines was reported yesterday. Andrew Brunette was most recently a Devils assistant and a former Preds player, scoring the first goal in franchise history. Titans back on the field for OTA. Select players and Mike Vrabel will be made available to media at 2 p.m. You can hear that live on Blaine and Mickey. The team did agree to terms with first-round pick offensive lineman Peter Skoronski, leaving quarterback Will Levis as the only drafted rookie who has yet to officially sign his deal. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Second down on this Wednesday. Welcome in. Lovely to have you guys here. Whether you're hanging out with us on FM radio, Zone TV, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, you can live stream the show. Or the 104.5 The Zone app. We're happy to have you. Dumbest thing in sports this week is what we are getting ready to do, so give me your nominations, 615-737-1045. We will get to them momentarily. We are also going to get into some more stuff about Caleb Farley and what we make of him heading into another season, his third on the Tennessee Titans roster. But there will be time for that. Meanwhile, Bud, go ahead and give me the music.
Let's be honest. You've already seen something this week that made you say,
"What the is this?"
That's bullshit.
What the hell? Give me some more now.
Something so mind-numbingly idiotic that you just want to get it off your chest.
Dumber than a second coat of paint.
Some idiot. You are really dumb. For real.
It's the dumbest thing in sports this week on the Buck Rising Show.
You know the number? Call in with your dumbest thing in sports this week. 615-737-1045. I'm going to get us started. So there's a story going around. This is slow news time, right? A couple of days ago, I believe it was Sunday night. On ESPN.com, one of the main headlines, free agent running back. It's funny to think Le'Veon Bell is still technically not retired from the NFL. He's not that old. But either way, Le'Veon Bell, he's still out here. He's a free agent. And the headline says, Le'Veon Bell says he smoked marijuana before games. So he did an appearance on the Steel Here, S-T-E-E-L, Steel Here podcast, which is focusing on apparently the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, of course, Le'Veon Bell famously from 2013 to 2017, sat out the 2018 season, and then ended up with the Jets. Quote, looking back on this, that's what I did. When I was playing football, I smoked, bro. Even before the games, I'd smoke. I'd go out there and run for 152 touchdowns. There's some more comments and all these different things. Dumbest thing, he's only 31, by the way. Doesn't it feel like Le'Veon Bell should be like 35?
It feels like he's been out of the league for, 2-3 years now.
I mean, that last Jet season was a while ago. I guess he was a Chief or a Raven. He was a Raven pretty recently, I want to say. Either way, dumbest thing in sports this week is people who still care about this. Spoiler alert. Breaking news. A lot of athletes smoke. A lot of people smoke. I know it's not legal in the state where we currently broadcast from, but whether it's smoking, whether it's edibles, whatever the case may be, especially in the pain tolerance industry, I am more surprised by people who don't incorporate some kind of THC in as a professional athlete. I'm more surprised by people who don't incorporate THC into a part of their weekly pain management process than I am the guys who don't do it. So whether that's before games, after games, if you're in that league that Johnny Manziel was in recently, it's at halftime or after you score a touchdown. Remember that? The dude whipped out a joint on the sideline, just ripping it. The dumbest thing in sports this week is people who still make this a story. The stigma around marijuana is non-existent at this stage. People are more interested. I think people are trying to now stigmatize things like mushroom chocolate bars and things like that in states like Oregon and Washington. It's just not that deep. Relax. Literally. What you got?
My dumbest thing in sports this week, I'll keep it in Destin, but my dumbest thing in sports is me. because context matters. Yesterday, my oh no of the weekend was Eli Drinkwitz with the one cherry-picked quote that Drinkwitz said when speaking to media down in Destin about NIL, when he said, we're giving these kids life-changing money. People are making more money in NIL than my brother-in-law, who's a pediatrician. He saves lives. And we sat here and we roasted Eli Drinkwitz. We said, well, coach, you're a football coach. You're making $6 million a year. Do you save lives? Why are you complaining about kids saving lives, the kids that make it possible for you to make millions of dollars per year? But now, Eli Drinkwitz, after getting a ton of backlash, tweeted the full context of the question and answer from yesterday, where he said, I am in no way complaining about player compensation. I'm fully supportive and always have been. So the question was, it's interesting because the question wasn't even about NIL, but the question from the reporter was, when you see issues with gambling arising, what's your approach with your team about that issue? Is there an element of surprise or is that inevitable? And Drinkwitz said, and y'all are really trying to get me in trouble here. He said, Deion Sanders had a really good quote the other day talking about young men are joining a business, but we want to treat them like kids. We're giving guys, 18, 19, 22-year-olds, life-changing money. People are making more in NIL than my brother-in-law, who's a pediatrician, who saves lives. And we kind of do it cavalier, and we think there's not going to be any side effect. There's not going to be any issues. There's information out there. There's bad actors always trying to make a dollar. I think it's going to become one of the key issues that we face in our locker rooms. I think it's more prevalent because there's more money involved. Everyone's trying to make a dollar. These young men are getting a lot of money that is a lot right now, other than trying to hand out advice and provide some parameters to it. With this NIL situation, we've created our own problems in college sports. So I am the dumbest thing in sports this week because that quote makes a lot more sense when Eli Drinkwitz is talking about the responsibilities that come with an 18-year-old making more money than somebody who saves lives and how there are no guardrails around it and the bad actors that could come into the picture. So I apologize, Eli Drinkwitz, for roasting you on these airwaves yesterday when I saw a cherry-picked quote that had no other context.
It's how he looks, isn't it? That makes you want to take a shot at Eli Drinkwitz.
Oh,
it's his face. It's for
that,
sure his face.
Yeah, it's that.
It's the hair, it's the glasses, it's the whole thing.
That Bill Gates sort of look. I don't know. I don't mind Eli Drinkwitz. A lot of people are annoyed with him because he likes to talk and he makes jokes and he hasn't done that. He's kind of taken that Steve Spurrier role of taking funny little jabs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but Spurrier was good.
Right, but he's not. He doesn't win championships like Spurrier.
He doesn't have winning seasons.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't have a winning record.
Yeah, that's why I think people get annoyed with Drinkwitz. But I don't know. I have no reason to hate Eli Drinkwitz. He has done nothing to me. Tell me what reason I would have. You seem skeptical. What reason should I have to hate Eli Drinkwitz?
You're a homer.
Why do I hate Mizzou? Why should I hate Mizzou?
SEC East.
Oh, SEC East.
No, not really, but
yeah, they came into the East in 2012. I don't know. I got nothing against Eli Drinkwitz.
615-737-1045. That was big of you to apologize. Well done. Peyton in Hendersonville has the dumbest thing in sports this week. Go ahead, Peyton.
How are you doing, Buck?
Great.
So,
nope.
Today, and
Go
ran
ahead.
across something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. That's our fault, Peyton.
No, you're okay. The LA Dodgers, I don't know when the game is, but it's coming up here soon. And they're openly going to honor a trans LGBTQ plus community or group before one of their games or at a halftime show. Well, that same group that they're honoring has made very discriminating and horrible comments about the Jewish community. And I think it's wrong. And Clayton Kershaw said, which is obviously, I don't think I'm wrong for saying this, but he's probably top 3 pitcher that's ever came across the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
He said he doesn't support it. How do you think he feels? And if I'm him in the next game that I play, I'm throwing strikes right down the middle, and I'm hoping that they slam them out of the park. That's my dumbest thing in sports is LA Dodgers.
Thanks for the call, Peyton. So I'm looking at the AP headline right now, specifically to Clayton Kershaw. So what Clayton Kershaw is disagreeing with, the LA Dodgers are welcoming a satirical LGBTQ plus group called the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence at the team's annual Pride Night, right? June is Pride Month coming up. So you've got Kershaw telling the LA Times on Monday that the team's decision to honor the group after it rescinded its original invitation. Oh, that's interesting. So they invited them, rescinded the invitation, and then invited them again. Oh, see, this sounds more like mismanagement than the fault of Clayton Kershaw or the LGBTQ plus group that they invited. So the original invitation prompted him to approach the Dodgers about expediting the announcement that the team was bringing back Christian Faith and Family Day later this season. So he's saying, I think we were always going to do Christian Faith Day this year, but I think the timing of our announcement was sped up. Picking a date and going those different things was part of it as well. Yes, it was in response to the highlighting of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence by the Dodgers. So I don't know anything about the group. I don't want to speak out of turn on the group that they've invited for Pride Night. He also added that he will not boycott Pride Night on June 16th when the Dodgers host the Giants. I mean, he's saying it has nothing to do with the LGBTQ community or pride or anything like that. This is simply a group that was making fun of a religion that I don't agree with. Okay, so it's not about them being a trans group. It's about them making fun of religion. And I assume in the name that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and, where religious entities tend to fall on the side of pride or LGBTQ plus, I would understand why somebody like Clayton Kershaw, who I assume is religious, would not be crazy about that idea. Maybe it's specific to the group because you're gonna run into this stuff anyway. And when you're involving not just the LGBTQ plus community as a part of Pride Month, which of course is completely fine. Nashville SC just did it in one of the best environments that I think that stadium has had all year, right, Lucas?
Yeah, maybe since it opened. I mean, it was electric on Sunday.
That stuff doesn't matter to me, but for obvious reasons, because it shouldn't matter. But the idea that they are a mock religious organization is probably going to piss a lot more people off than the initial invitation situation. We'll continue with the dumbest thing in sports this week. Coming up next, your phone call, 615-737-1045. I thought I handled that pretty well for a pretty complex issue. You thought I was going to botch it, didn't you? Didn't you? You sitting there in your car. You thought I was going to screw that up. I'm Buck Rise. Yes. 1045 The Sound. We got calls on the dumbest thing in sports. We got a lot of different things to get into, including how the Titans might benefit from DeAndre Hopkins without actually signing him. That's something Lucas put in the grid this morning, and I am curious to hear his explanation on that part. I'm sure many of you are as well. 615-737-1045 is how you tell us what the dumbest thing in sports this week is. Let's go to Eric in Nashville. Up next. Hey, Eric.
Yes. So last week, the Denver Nuggets complete a 4-game sweep of the Los Angeles Lakers and sit there courtside to Kyrie Irving. He's hugging LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the guys before and after the game, hugging and shaking hands with other celebrities, and he's waving to the crowd as he's sitting courtside. Then after the game is over, the next day, he goes on social media and says, "Hey, quit speculating, talking about me, whether or not I'm going to stay with the Mavericks or going to the Lakers. Are you kidding me? What do you think the media is going to talk about if you're sitting courtside at the game? If you don't want them talking about you, then keep a lower profile and not go to the games, or at least sit somewhere where nobody can see you." He is unbelievable. Guys, that's my dumbest thing in sports. Y'all take care, and we'll talk again soon.
It's a really good one. I feel like this should be the dumbest thing in the Kyrie Irving Memorial Dumbest Thing in Sports This Week segment. I feel like he's been so heavily featured in the 3 years that it's not quite 3 years, in the 2 years that we've had the radio show, that I feel like he has some grander part to play in this segment.
Do you watch South Park?
Yes.
I don't know if you had seen any of the new episodes where they make fun of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And Prince Harry and Meghan did not like it. But basically, their characters, they based the Canadian prince and princess off of Harry and Meghan.
Sure.
Going on talk shows with like picket signs going, "We want privacy. We want privacy." Like really upset that they're not getting their privacy and being very public about it and putting themselves in the public eye, demanding and being upset that they don't feel like that's Kyrie.
Oh, my God,
yes. Constantly in the spotlight, constantly saying dumb things, trying to sound way smarter than everybody else, and then getting upset when we talk about it.
Well, I was just going to ask you, who likes to be talked about and then acts like they don't like to be talked about more than Kyrie Irving? Because the only nominee that I could come up with is the two that you just gave me, or Tom Brady. Tom Brady loves being talked about. Loves it. It's the only way that I know Tom Brady's a human, is that Tom Brady delights in how often Tom Brady's name is still thrown out there for things like this Raiders job. If somehow Jimmy Garoppolo at like 27 can't find a way to get out on the field. You know who can? 46-year-old Tom Brady. I'm ready. Let's ride. Oh, my God. Brady might beat out Kyrie, though. Maybe it's just such a smaller sample size from Brady, though, because it just happened in the last couple of years where he seems to really, really enjoy how much he gets to be Tom Brady at this stage. Chris is in Gallatin with the dumbest thing in sports. Go ahead, Chris.
My dumbest thing in sports this week has got to be Scottie Pippen. On Friday, he went on a local Chicago radio program and was really bashing Michael Jordan, saying that once they started playing like a real team there in Chicago, everybody forgot about Michael Jordan. And they was saying LeBron's much better than Michael Jordan. But turns out Michael Jordan's son is dating his ex-wife.
Yeah.
So he's just trying to get back at him. That's my dumbest thing in sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Do you have the clip of Scotty?
LeBron will be the greatest statistical guy to ever play the game of basketball. And there's no comparison to him. None. So, does that make him the greatest player to ever play the game? I'll leave that out for debating, because I don't believe that there's a great player, because our game is a team game, and one player can't do it. Like, I seen Michael Jordan play before I came to play with the Bulls. You guys seen him play. He's a horrible player. He was horrible to play with. He was all one-on-one. He's shooting bad shots. And all of a sudden, we become a team and we start winning. Everybody forgot who he was.
Scotty. Like, there is all kinds of statistical evidence to back up his first point. Michael Jordan, the best version of Michael Jordan was with Scottie Pippen. The championship version of Jordan was with Scottie Pippen. Like, there is no disputing that. The best version of Michael Jordan was playing with Scottie Pippen. But then when Scotty takes it to the extreme and says he's a horrible player.
He was a horrible player.
Just says it casually.
Till I got there.
I mean, it is now, it's been reported that Scotty's ex-wife is in fact dating the son of Michael Jordan, which has to delight Michael Jordan in ways that you cannot describe.
Is there a more publicized partnership or teammates that achieve so much together that hate each other more than Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan seem to?
Oh, man. Well, it's definitely gotten worse publicly since The Last Dance. Because I think Scotty very much did not appreciate the way that he was portrayed in the contract or sitting out situation. Yeah. He did not seem to appreciate that.
Like, what's the worst, rock band breakup of all time?
The Eagles. Don't the Eagles famous? I mean, the ones that are still alive, but weren't when they were all still alive. Don't they famously hate each other?
Eagles definitely up there. But they, I think they've reconciled. They tour together. Joe Walsh and Don Henley, and they tour with Glenn Fry's son. But yeah, I mean, that's up there for sure.
I can't in sports. I can't think of one. I mean, Durant and Draymond didn't seem to like each other very much when they were winning championships with Golden State. But that's not to the extent of Jordan Pippen, not something that famous. I mean, is there a receiver that hates a particular quarterback that we're forgetting? Is there a coach or a player who famously resents a coach? I can't think of anything to that scale or even that gets close other than Antonio Brown and Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady would still be friends with Antonio Brown if he thought he could help him win another Super Bowl. 615-737-1045 is how you nominate the dumbest thing in sports this week. It is weird to see how resentful Scottie Pippen is. And Michael Jordan gets to win no matter what. Scotty's not going to be able to pull people to his side by being publicly bitter, right? That's not going to benefit anybody. That's not going to help Scotty's perception. People are just going to look at Scotty and say, you're ridiculous. What are you talking about? The greatest player of all time is a horrible player before you got there. And I do think that the Michael Jordan stuff, while he was clearly and obviously the best of his generation, there is no disputing one of the winningest players in any area ever, right? Nobody's fighting against that. There have definitely been better basketball players since Michael Jordan. Just by nature of evolution. Kevin Durant is ungodly to watch when he's at his peak health. LeBron James, right? It's not ridiculous to say that there have been better basketball players than Michael Jordan, while Michael Jordan was still the greatest player and greatest winner of his time. And Scotty, it's a toxic situation, it would appear. And not that any of this is my business, but I do think there has famously been some tension with his ex-wife and who she dates or who she has been seen with since their marriage ended. So I'm certain that is not. I'm certain that does not factor in some way, shape, or form to Scotty's commentary. Just even if you're not thinking about it, even if it's just inherent bias that you have at this point. It's human. But, to call Michael Jordan a horrible basketball player is kind of ridiculous. Joe in Lebanon is next. Hey, Joe.
George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin.
Ooh.
For a good love-hate relationship.
So is there anything else that reaches that? I mean, because that's a really good one, Joe, but I don't know that that's talked about in the context of Pippen and Jordan. Would you say?
Well, I know Martin went out and talked about how he hated him and how he was a criminal, and Steinbrenner threw it right back at him. I mean, I think it was a pretty serious one, but I'm a Yankees guy, and I kept up with it, but I think that I think it's a pretty good one. I mean, Pippen, I think, is just jealousy. I just think his is straight-up jealousy of Jordan, and he doesn't want to admit that, but I think it's jealousy. How about when Pippen went to the Knicks? They do real well when he was there.
Yeah. There's plenty of things that are being thrown back in Scotty's face after that. He did it over Memorial Day weekend, though. He gave everybody something they could chew on. You thought you were getting away from the LeBron Jordan debate? No. Scottie Pippen is here.
Puka on the F&M Bank chat says, when they played together, Shaq and Kobe, but they did reconcile.
Shaq and Kobe is a good one. And now that's obviously more recent than Billy Martin and George Steinbrenner. I think the last year of Billy Martin's career was like 1989. So that's obviously been some time ago. Shaq and Kobe is a really good one, where Kobe is out here publicly talking about how fat and lazy Shaq is, and Shaq is just to his core Shaquille O'Neal telling Kobe Bryant, hey, how's my bleep taste, right? That kind of thing. T.N. Berg says, why is the NBA so babyish? The NBA is for sure the most dramatic of the leagues, right? Of the American professional sports leagues. There is not anything that is more TMZ that dates, that involves themselves more in like the celebrity element. James Harden at Fashion Week in Paris, right? How many name the basketball player that's dated a Kardashian, right? Like they do seem to entangle themselves more often. Maybe just because there's less of them.
Yeah, I mean, no sport focuses on individuals more than the NBA, right? There's more emphasis put on the impact one single individual can have on a team. More
of the team sports.
Yeah, more so in the NBA than any other team sport. And it kind of trickles over.
The NBA is for sure the most individualized team sport of any of the, because obviously, tennis and the actual solo sports place the individual at a much higher level. But in terms of like the ecosystem of actual performance versus off the court dialogue, I do think the NBA literally leads the league. Drew is in Murfreesboro next. Hey, Drew.
Hey, I was going to say Juwan Jennings and Butch Jones.
Lucas, you want to speak to that one?
That it did end. It wasn't even Butch Jones, because Juwan Jennings got kicked off the team when, oh my goodness, Brady Hoke. I was not going to let that name escape me. Brady Hoke was the interim. So Juwan obviously had his moments in the sun early in his Tennessee career. The Hail Mary against Georgia. I mean, just a week before that was the touchdown catch against Florida and that comeback win. And that was all his sophomore year. So he had already become kind of a cult hero for Tennessee. He's a dog, all of those things. And then at the end of the 2017 season, a very injury-marred season for Juwan Jennings, he went on a rant on Instagram. He went on Instagram Live talking about his coaches and how they weren't going to let him play against Vanderbilt. And remember, this is a 4-8 at the time, 4-7 Tennessee team about to play Vanderbilt, worst Tennessee team in the history of Tennessee football. And Juwan wanted to play. He hadn't really played all year, and coaches weren't going to let him play. It was the interim staff with Brady Hoke leading. Butch had already been fired. So he went on an expletive-laced tirade on Instagram Live, trashing the coaches, trashing Vanderbilt, talking about how much he hates Vanderbilt. And Brady Hoke dismissed him from the team, and he was summarily reinstated when Jeremy Pruitt took over as head coach and had a big year in 2018.
Yeah, because he's the best wide receiver on the roster, you dopes. Figure out how to make it work. He was definitely talking about Butch on that video.
I mean, Brady Hoke was the one that kicked him off officially.
I'm recklessly speculating, but he's definitely talking about Butch in that video.
I cannot speak to Juwan and Butch's personal relationship.
But he's definitely talking about Butch. Kyle in Nashville is next.
Hey, I just wanted to add to the list. I would say Donovan McNabb and Terrell Owens, they had a pretty bad feud. And I think just recently, within the past couple of years, he was quoted saying that he would knock the lights out of T.O. if he ever saw him again. So, thanks, guys.
That's up there.
That's my quarterback. Which it's such a shame. Those Eagles teams were so much fun. And for those two to publicly hate each other the way that they do. Like, what was it and maybe it's just our generational gap in terms of knowledge. What was it the source of the McNabb-T.O. feud? Like, why do they dislike each other? I'm sure it's been a great many reasons over time, but, like, what was the initial reason for the hate?
I cannot speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, it's also about what was their relationship like before the split? Like, did Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, were they ever really, truly close friends? like confidants in one another.
No.
You know, because like the Mythbusters just never liked each other. Mike and Mike, famously, never really got along.
And we're great.
Did a fantastic show.
Like, I know that we're running this through our industry bias, but like to do that show for 4 hours at that time of day at like 4:30 a.m.
The most popular show in sports radio.
And they did it in a way that was still so familial, and apparently they hated each other, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, so you have these partnerships where they never really liked each other.
Like you and me.
Right, exactly. I'm interested more in the ones that there something happened to create the divide. You know what I mean? I don't know if Pippen and Jordan were ever that tight to begin with. I don't know.
Oh, Russell says Terrell Owens blamed the Super Bowl loss on McNabb being hungover during the game.
Did he really?
I
never saw that
cannot
story.
verify, but that is hilarious if that's true. Unbelievable. People are citing a bunch of different reasons for the feud. Anyway, 615-737-1045. The Preds fired a coach yesterday and then summarily hired a coach. We're going to talk about the impact of that. You'll hear from Alex Doherty of, no longer of A to Z Sports. Alex started his own network or his own website. Good on him. Anyway, Alex Doherty, Preds writer, will tell you what this means for the Preds offseason coming up next. Couple of news items to get to. It broke yesterday that the Preds were moving on from John Hines. They have since made their new head coach official in Andrew Burnett. But before we get to the Preds and some audio from Alex Doherty yesterday on the Blaine and Mickey show. So he bought Penalty Box Radio. Alex did. Is it still called Penalty Box Radio?
Believe so, yeah.
Okay. Well, good on Alex. Congratulations to him. Quick note from the world of the Tennessee Vols, the basket Vols, that is specifically. We have a returnee.
That's right. Another returnee. A few weeks ago was Santiago Vescovi announcing he's running it back for one more year, and now Josiah Jordan-James announcing on social media just minutes ago that he's going to run it back one more year. He posted the Kobe Bryant "Job's Not Done" clip on his Twitter account.
Yeah, so the official website for the team has put an article up based on that. And we know that Josiah Jordan-James coming back for his 5th season is going to be a big part of what this team wants to do. It's going to contribute to the depth. Obviously, he was only available for, 24 games last season?
Yeah, he was really marred by injuries in the first half of the year. Picked up a knee injury early, but largely in the back half and the most critical part of the season, he was available.
Right, and still, 4th leading scorer, 10 points per game. He was the 3rd leading rebounder on the team, 4.7. And so what you continue to retain is postseason experience, championship experience, if you want to talk about the SEC tournament title from a couple of years ago. And so obviously what they're going to focus on, in addition to, what do you got? Jonas Adu, you got Jemai Mashak. Is it Toby? Am I going to butcher his last name?
Toby Awaka.
I just get scared of those. There's a lot of international players on the roster. They do have great depth, and I think it's this COVID eligibility situation benefits veteran teams like the University of Tennessee, because you can basically run it back. Now, your boy Urosh not coming back, announced that he was not returning to the University of Tennessee for another season, which I think everybody can kind of, good to part under those terms, because it felt like people were growing tiresome of Urosh's personality. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, antics.
Antics is a better way to put it, not personality.
And Urosh really did develop nicely at Tennessee. That he came over from Arizona State, and there was a big stink made about the fact that he wasn't eligible, and they appealed to the NCAA, and it took forever, and then he became eligible, and he wasn't as good as everybody thought he was just because he was a 7-foot big man. But he did improve a lot, and he made some big impacts. He was really good. I mean, he was as important as anybody in setting the tone in that Duke game in the round of 32, and he had some big games. But, yes, the Urosh Plavsic era is over at Tennessee. Olivier Cumwa likely moving on. He has all the options on the table. He's in the portal. He's testing NBA draft waters. He has even coming back open as a possibility. And it seems like the Julian Phillips time at Tennessee will come to an end as he has both entered the portal and is testing NBA draft waters. So they'll be deep. They'll be very deep. They added in the portal, and it's going to be a lot of moving parts for Rick Barnes.
So transitioning from Vols to Preds, the news broke yesterday that the Preds are making that change. John Hines replaced by Andrew Burnett. And, Preds ties, you got them. Trotz and Burnett now. Poyle still looming or lurking, however you want to phrase it.
He'll be there today.
He's still in the front office. And today, by what today, Lucas, means is that they will have the announcement press conference for Andrew Burnett today at what time?
1 p.m.
Okay, so Blaine and Mickey, I'm sure, will have some updates.
We'll monitor it.
I know they'll carry Mike Vrabel's press conference live in the 2 o'clock hour, so a lot of coaches talking on Blaine and Mickey today. But I thought Alex Doherty did a good interview yesterday, speaking of Blaine and Mickey. He was on with them. You can check out that full interview in their podcast. And he was talking about, the entirety of the Preds offseason and what changes like this mean for guys who are still on the roster.
Everything is on the table at this point for the Nashville Predators. If he made a change at head coach, we are about to witness a off-season for the ages because, Ryan Johansson, Matt Duchene, Philip Forsberg, all these guys, Brian McDonough, probably not Roman Josi, but UC Soros, all of these names. I mean, there's no one that's untouchable now. I mean, if you're making these kind of changes, you are ready to re-gear and just completely retool everything. Especially someone like a Ryan Johansson, who already seems kind of halfway out, halfway in, and so there's changes there. But does it change the expectations? I don't even know. I mean, I think that we have to see what's going to happen next, because we would have to see what's going to happen with the draft, what's going to happen with trades, free agency, which of these unrestricted free agents out there are they going to go after to really make that determination, because I think they view Brunette as not just a win, sort of win of the future, like a kind of long-term kind of hire, but like a win now guy. I mean,
so that's Alex Doherty on Blaine and Mickey yesterday. No one's safe is apparently the message. And I mean, is there anybody that should be off limits, right? Are we not having the same conversation around the Preds that we are currently around the Titans? You probably heard me kind of snort in the middle of that when he said retool, rebuild, because he's doing the same R-word bit that we've been doing all offseason. And apparently the Preds, new general manager, Titans, new general manager, Preds, new head coach, Titans, same head coach, but similar situations, I suppose. Is there anybody who is untradeable or unmovable, not just because maybe it's in their contract, but because they are so valuable to this franchise? Because Forsberg is the thing that comes to mind to me, but maybe I'm just doing that because I know him to be great over the course of his time here, even though that has not felt as tangible in the last couple of years. And again, health situations notwithstanding.
Well, I think Roman Josi is the most critical cultural piece of that roster right now. So, and Alex mentioned it kind of in passing. Yeah, probably not Roman Josi, as he was listing all the players that could be on the block. But the point is, it's all an unknown. That everything is off the table as far as what we knew about the Preds under David Poile, under John Hines, new coach, Barry Trotz, new GM. David Poile appears to still have a say. He'll be at the presser today, like we said. But if it is going to be Andrew Brunette's show, then, yeah, you should expect some big changes. I think it's a good hire by the Preds. I mean, I think he's a really highly thought of guy. If you're going to get someone who has not been a head coach, which he has, who was the interim for the entire season for the Florida Panthers last year, was hired in October when the current head coach had stepped down. They brought him on late October. So he essentially coached that whole season, led him to a President's Trophy. They get swept in the second round of the playoffs, and they opt not to keep Brunette. They tried to keep him on the staff, just not as head coach. He left, took an assistant position with the New Jersey Devils. So he's going to have the familiarity with Barry Trotz, with the market, with the franchise. Preds fans will know him, especially the ones that have been around since the start. So it's got that storybook aspect, and he is an up-and-coming guy in the business in the NHL. So it's a really intriguing hire that will be made more intriguing when we really see what the Preds are going to do with this roster this offseason.
Hines was 134, 96, and 18 with the Preds. This is the statement from Barry Trotz yesterday. We want to become more of an offensive team. And Andrew, talking about Andrew Brunette, specializes on that side of the ice. He lived it as a player, and he coaches it as a coach. He is as good of an offensive teacher and power play coach as there is in the game today, which, for those of you who have been paying attention to the Preds in the last couple of years, you know how critical it is for them to be much better, much improved on the power play. Feels like consistently since Laviolette, we've been talking about power play issues. He will be great with our young players, and I know because of his background as a player, he will connect well with our top skilled players. So that's Barry Trotz in a statement yesterday. Titans assistant coaches are speaking right now. The new defensive backs coach, Chris Harris, just spoke on Caleb Farley and his status with this team's secondary. We're going to talk about what Caleb Farley needs to prove the most this offseason. You'll hear from Chris Harris, his new DB's coach, coming up next.
It is 12:02. Good afternoon from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. Titans are back on the field for OTAs. Assistant coaches are speaking with the media right now. Select players and Mike Vrabel will be made available at 2 p.m. You can hear all of that live on Blaine and Mickey. The Nashville Predators will officially announce new head coach Andrew Brunette this afternoon in a press conference at 1 p.m. Brunette hired to replace John Hines. He was most recently a Devils assistant and a former Preds player who scored the first goal in franchise history. Brunette, Barry Trotz, and David Poyle will all be in attendance at the press conference. Josiah Jordan-James, the Tennessee wing, is coming back for another year. He just announced on his social media. So Tennessee basketball returning two veterans in the 2023-24 season in Josiah Jordan-James and Santiago Vescovi, who announced his return a few weeks ago. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour on this Wednesday. Thanks for hanging out with us. Last one to go before we head out to Titans practice for the day, OTAs. In fact, they should be getting on the field just about now. They'll have practice until 2 o'clock, and then you'll hear from players and Mike Vrabel. I'll be out there for that portion of it. Of course, they'll carry the press conference on Blaine and Mickey. Your phone calls are welcome. What are you most excited to watch? What position battles are you most interested in at this particular time of year? 615-737-1045 is how you join the conversation. You are going to hear from a couple of different people here in just a second because assistant coaches, position coaches have been speaking to the media. We know what the staff changes are. We know that there's a lot of people that stayed in new roles. A lot of people got shuffled around. Handful of new hires to come in and try and adapt to this new offensive system in particular that this team is going to run. We'll have time to talk about the offense in a second because the comments from the new running backs coach, Justin Outen, I thought were particularly interesting. But first, let's have a conversation about Caleb Farley. Now, of players on this roster, I would imagine that even though Caleb Farley has played next to no football for this team, and the sample size that he has appeared in has been poor to substantially below average at this point. He has flashed in moments, but in a sample size of, 9 games last year, he was more liability than he was asset. He had no passes defensed last year. He started in 1 game while appearing in 9. No interceptions, no forced fumbles. He had 9 tackles. Solo tackles is what he is credited for. 10 total tackles on the year. So Caleb Farley is a first-round pick heading into year 3. A vet. Somebody who should have established himself on this roster. Somebody who should, if not be cornerback 1, or have decided himself, announced himself as cornerback 1, should certainly not be on the outside looking in of the, not even the starting rotation, the depth rotation. Is he the last corner on the depth chart right now? I mean, not counting, of say guys that we think are going to make the active roster, right? Where they have Fulton, McCreary, Murphy Bunting, Molden, who sounds like safety and corner this year. Chris Jackson is still there. And then there's Caleb Farley. Of the guys who I think would have a shot at making this roster, Caleb Farley's probably 6 on that list. Isn't he? I'd play Chris Jackson before I played Caleb Farley. Chris Jackson, by the way, spectacular job by him to continue to last this long in the league as a COVID 7th-round pick.
At a Marshall.
That dude has made himself, and really was he wasn't a corner at Marshall. He was more safety than he was corner. So these are adjustments that I think he's made well. And Caleb Farley is just somebody who has played precious little corner across his entire career, college and pro now. Was recruited as a wide receiver, and at this point, I don't know what he is.
He was a special teams player last year, right? I mean, that's how he got on the field in the 4 games that he did.
That, outside of a horrid rash of injuries that saw him, I think he was starting in the Washington game. Because isn't that when Diami Brown took him for a ride?
He had 1 tackle. That's his stats from the Washington game.
So that would be, there. I think if we looked at
I'd have to look at a snap count.
I'm sure I could find that with relative ease, the game that he was technically a starter for in 2022. Just a quick peek at his game logs. He was a starter. No, this just shows the games that he appeared in.
Right.
Okay.
It just shows games he appeared in any numbers. So if he just played special teams, you wouldn't be able to.
I've got the snap counts here. So he played 72% of the snaps against Buffalo.
Okay.
Who was hurt against Buffalo? Was Fulton hurt already?
Well, that game was also over for a significant part of the second half.
Yeah, but they really didn't pull people. They really didn't pull people until like the third quarter got out of hand.
Malik got out there.
Malik was for sure out there. But I'm trying to – so, yeah, he played 49 defensive snaps. That has to be the game, right? 49 defensive snaps against Buffalo?
Yeah.
It's either that or the Colts game. He played 27 against the Colts at Indianapolis. Either way, Caleb Farley, what do you do with him? Because this team probably has the worst first-round draft pick in the history of first-round draft picks in Isaiah Wilson on their record. And they followed up that the next draft with Caleb Farley, who can't get on the field. And when he can get on the field, he's nightmarish. I mean, and I'm not being hyperbolic, like nightmarish. And I don't think it's his fault. Like, I don't think he's not a hard worker. There's just something there that he cannot get a handle on. Whether it's technique, whether it's he's in his own head, whether it's a confidence situation. And I know Blaine Bishop has pushed back on me when I cite confidence as something that might be inhibiting a professional athlete. Because, I mean, you really have to be broken as an athlete to lack confidence, right? These guys are at the height of their profession as professional athletes. They're at the height of physical fitness. They're at the height of physical achievement. Like, they are the 1% of the 1%. Even Caleb Farley, who has not had a successful professional career at this point. Like, for Caleb Farley to lack confidence, while there might be evidence to suggest that in games, I can't imagine that's something he thinks he's dealing with. Like, I don't imagine that Caleb Farley thinks he's lacking confidence. But I can't speak to what's in his head. You know, I think for him, this is as important a camp as for anybody. OTAs, all of it. The fact that he's here, the fact that he's available, the fact that he's out there working, that's great. Christian Fulton is reportedly back from Miami, where he was training in South Florida, according to Teron Davenport. So Fulton is expected to be out there on the field. He should be out there on the field as they've started practice now. So whatever opportunity Caleb Farley might have had last week in the absence of Fulton is now gone, if even Farley was the person who might get snaps without Fulton on the field. So, I mean, do we envision a scenario where Chris Jackson makes the roster and Caleb Farley does not? Is special teams is the only selling point for Farley at this stage, and maybe there's more. Let's hear from Chris Harris, the new defensive backs coach. He was just speaking to the media about an hour ago. And I want you to hear him speak about Caleb Farley coming in from the outside.
You know what? We just expect Caleb to show up here every single day with the proper attitude, and he has done that thus far being here. He's been in the meetings. He's very attentive, paying attention, taking meticulous notes, and, you know, he's just working to get his body right to be able to join us out here on the field whenever that may be. You know, time will tell when that is, but, you know, he's doing everything that he needs to do right now.
So, I mean, generalities, right? And again, he's not available. He ended the year on IR. I'm pretty sure it was a back injury, if I remember correctly. I'll look that up
right.
Just to be certain. I want to be specific with the injury situation because he has had a couple at this point. Let's see. Caleb Farley Yeah, back surgery in December 2022. A disc in his back is what the injury was, which, again, was a similar situation to the thing that saw his draft stock fall to, I think it was 22nd in the first round of 2021. So what position battles are you most interested in seeing during OTAs? Again, remember that offensive line, defensive line, it's tough to determine right now when those guys aren't wearing pads, but there's a lot of other dudes out there working and a lot of different positions up for grabs. We'll take your phone calls on this. We'll talk about an interesting situation that it's just arisen with Derrick Henry. We'll tell you what's going on with that coming up next. OTAs underway, round 2. We've got another week of OTAs and then mandatory minicamp, and that'll be it for the summer. So we better soak up the football while we've got it, because then everybody takes a 6-week break. Kind of reset, refresh, and get ready for another football season. What position battles are you most interested in seeing playing out at this point? Or what questions do you have? I'm headed out to practice right after this. Be able to give you some insights and analysis tomorrow, certainly. And tonight on primetime, obviously. We'll do that as well. But let's go to the phones. 615-737-1045. Mark is in Murfreesboro up next. Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark. We haven't had one of those in a while.
Bye, Mark.
You think he's scrambling around, his phone's on mute? You got to figure out how to hit the button? Been chilling there for 30-some-odd minutes. Ready to talk about Titans position battles?
Game over, Mark.
Is he still there?
I don't know. Hey, Mark. No.
We haven't had one where we've caught somebody on the phone in a while. You remember that one? It had to have been a summer when we were taking calls on something, and some dude was like having a conversation with somebody else, like his neighbor, it sounded like.
It was Bill in Lebanon, it was...
What a time.
It was Labor Day weekend. It was the Friday, the day after the Tennessee season opener against Ball State. I remember. Very clearly.
National park trips and whatnot.
Yeah. Right. Bill in Lebanon wants to talk about the Tennessee game against Ball State. What's up, Bill?
Didn't. He was talking about going to Red Rocks or something like that. Meanwhile, before we get back to phones, Derrick Henry being at OTAs, significance of that versus, say, somebody like Kevin Byard. Can anybody in the class tell me the biggest difference between why Derrick Henry might feel it necessary to be at OTAs this year versus Kevin Byard?
Ooh, me, new offensive coordinator.
Yes, you. In the very tight-fitting Ferrari jersey.
Tight-fitting? Jersey?
What is it? Jersey?
Just a polo.
It's being commented on at this point. People are asking if you've been lifting or if you're just wearing slimmer-fitting shirts.
Life hack, yeah. Just wear slimmer-fitting shirts, and people will think that you're exercising.
It doesn't work if you're heading in the opposite direction. Curves are not your friend. Either way. Derrick Henry has a new offensive coordinator. Kevin Byard does not have a new defensive coordinator. This offense sounds like going to be not drastically different, but from a language standpoint, pretty different from what they've been running in the last couple of years. And you know who's grateful for Derrick Henry's presence? His new running backs coach, Justin Outen, who came to the Titans by way of the Denver Broncos and was speaking about Derrick Henry's presence earlier today.
I'm sure it helped having a new system getting put in and kind of going through the terminology and getting squared away with it. But, when he's here, he's here. It's not like he's just here for attendance purposes or kind of being just in the spotlight. He's here for his teammates, and he's here to learn the offense.
So that matters, right? Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, veteran presences at OTAs. You've got the new offensive line. All of them are there. All of the wide receivers that you have, they're there too. The running backs, their president accounted for, tight ends, all there too. The only person who's missing at this point, according to reports, because apparently Christian Fulton is there today, is Kevin Byard. The person who you're probably, I think if you had to run me down a list of people to not be worried about them being ready for a football season, Kevin Byard might be at the top. No health concerns, no lack of preparedness, no loss of edge, for example. No, I don't think there's going to be any hard feelings about the idea that they asked him to take a pay cut. I think Kevin Byard is, cliche, yes, but consummate professional athlete also. So, Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, the entire offense, they're learning a new system. They're learning a new language. They feel that it's essential for all of them to be together in this process, and I'm certain that Tim Kelly values that. I'm certain that Mike Vrabel values that as they try to get this thing off the ground. Had they been returning both of their coordinators as they were last year, attendance probably would have been lighter. But it does benefit them to get as much practice, as many reps, as much work, as much communication, working on that as a part of the process to prevent those kind of slip-ups that you might expect. Wait, are you giving somebody a second chance?
I'd like for him to explain himself.
What are you like reprimanding him like a child on the phone? What happened here?
Explain yourself.
All right, Mark in Murfreesboro is going to be required to explain himself. Go ahead, Mark.
My apologies, guys. My wife had called, and I had to click over, and it was you guys or the wife. Man.
She's vastly more important to pick up her phone call than it is to answer ours. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I just got a question, guys, about Will. I just wanted to pick
about
you guys'
who? I'm sorry.
About Will Levis.
Okay.
Just a question about why he was drafted overall. Do you think that with him being so close to Kentucky, that we're trying to fill seats from the region as much as possible? So with him being our quarterback of the future, possibly, that, more people start traveling to the new stadium if he's there that long. Do you think that was part of the general manager's idea of picking him over the others, I guess? I'll hang up.
I appreciate the call. No.
Over Hendon Hooker, who would have put substantially more butts in seats?
Here's what I'll say, okay? And, I don't think it's a out of bounds question. I think it's fair to think about those things, because wasn't that the biggest complaint about the Titans not taking Hendon Hooker? Is, you missed out on a huge opportunity to grow your fan base because one of the most productive players, if not the most productive player in college football last year, plays 3 hours to your east.
Which was ridiculous.
So let's take this in two parts. One, I mentioned not wanting to speak for Mike Vrabel earlier. I am comfortable in this setting speaking for Rand Carthon. I'm sure he would allow me the leeway. That played no part whatsoever in the Titans drafting Will Levis. The state of Kentucky, Titans fans who are Titans fans in the state of Kentucky, proximity, right? Bowling Green is what, an hour away, if that?
Yeah, there are Titans radio stations in Kentucky.
We're in Bowling Green. We are in Western Kentucky as a frequency. As the Titans flagship radio station.
Yeah, we get callers from there all the time.
So, the reach that Will Levis would add to that, it's even smaller than I think you're making it, because Kentucky, the University of Kentucky is the overwhelming fan favorite in the state of Kentucky, but Louisville, it's kind of like splitting up Knoxville and Memphis, right? They're two totally different places. Lexington and Louisville, and the rivalry of that fan base, even though it's not within the same conference, like, those places do not associate with one another. So while that might appeal to a couple extra Tackle Cats fans, the people who went to Louisville aren't going to look at Will Levis as being any extra reason to become a Titans fan. Because Louisville, where is it closer to? Indianapolis, by proximity. So, I would say that is a no. The reason Will Levis was drafted here is because they have a quarterback on an expiring contract. And Will Levis was clearly and obviously the most talented player available on the board. By the time they were picking quarterback, they need a quarterback. They I don't want to say tripped and fell into one because they traded up to get him, but they saw an opportunity to make this thing sustainable. They saw a player who they clearly felt, based on the reporting, where they tried to trade back up into the first round to get him. So they clearly see this as a first-round talent that fell to them in a favorable way, that they capitalized on their opportunity to land him, and if all goes to plan, is the foreseeable answer at quarterback for his rookie deal.
Who already has a baseline understanding of a pro-style offense similar to what the Titans run.
Yes.
Or have run in recent
the
years,
past.
Which could look a little bit different. I think that's the most critical factor in why they drafted Levis.
He plays in pro-style systems. He knows the plays. The rookie quarterback, think about this. The rookie quarterback already knows your plays because he's been running them. He's just been calling them something different. So if the only thing you have to worry about is not, can he operate in a huddle, Malik?
Who was drafted out of the opposite of a pro-style
polar
offense.
Opposite, a high school offense.
Yes.
And in a way, and coming from a much, much lower level of competition to where he could just out-athlete guys at will, to his credit. And yes, Malik is a superior athlete. Very much so. You're talking about a dude who knows the playbook. All you got to do is teach him the language. That's real easy to accomplish. Real easy to maneuver. Now, whether he's able to do it or not is entirely up to him. And that's not going to be determined in an OTA. That's not going to be determined in a week, a month. I mean, potentially not a year. If all goes to plan, I don't envision him seeing the field this year. I think people are, and at least I've noticed a conversation growing externally about the idea of quarterback competition, right? Ryan Tannehill being pushed. I'm seeing people talking about Ryan Tannehill not finishing the year as the Titans starter, and I would say to you, Ryan Tannehill, as long as he still represents the best quarterback option on the roster
and is healthy,
is not in any danger of losing his job to either of these two players. Levis could very easily slide into that role next year, and they could move on from Ryan Tannehill, and you could be clear of, what is it, a 36, I think it's 36.6, the cap hit this year, and not have to worry about dead quarterback money, and not have to worry about draft capital that you've given up, and all these different things, not have to worry about signing Jimmy Garoppolo with a broken foot the way that the Raiders are, and now having to worry about whether his contract's going to be void. Like, you have your solution there. And by far and away, the talent evaluators in the NFL will tell you Will Levis was clearly and obviously superior to Hendon Hooker. Now, I know that's something that, even on this show, people have taken contention with. But I guess, Lucas, is what you've seen, like the difference in opinion between Levis and Hooker, the opinion of the talent and what they're going to be able to do with them, is that, do you understand the justification now that the NFL has told you so, or do you think it's still a lot of fuss about Levis versus Hooker?
I understand it more from the Titans' perspective than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I completely understand why they prioritize Levis and what he has from a schematic standpoint and a baseline knowledge, and essentially being able to start ahead of the curve in that regard when they were so behind in that department with Malik Willis a year ago. Like, I firmly believe, nobody has told me this, I firmly believe that the Malik Willis experience on just not being able to process an NFL offense at any point during his rookie year played at least a little bit into the idea of going to get a quarterback that will be way ahead in that department. And Hendon Hooker, like, he could pick that up, but he's just not that.
No.
As far as from a schematic standpoint, he's just not. It's not the offense he came from. It's not to say he couldn't learn it. I think Hooker's a smart guy, great football character, all of those things. But if that's what they were prioritizing, then yes, it makes a ton of sense why Levis was the priority.
Hendon Hooker could damn near have the Detroit Lions offense mastered by the time we get through training camp. That's possible. That's entirely possible. But if you're looking at the traits, both tangible and intangible, if you're looking at the operation, if you're looking at the readiness, if you're looking at the system that they're coming from, Will Levis wins that way. Amar on the F&M Bank chat, a couple of people in the F&M Bank chat saying, say that again, Buck, for the Vols fans in the back. Amar says, don't say that too loud, Buck. The UT fans are going to boycott you. Listen, I don't think the vast majority of Tennessee fans were the ones that were bent out of shape about this. I think there were a couple of people who were completely crazed about this notion, who have such a visceral hatred of everything Kentucky for understandable reasons. I'm not asking you to remove your fan biases from this. I'm just saying, like, I don't even think people are saying Vols fans, like it's an entirely Vols fans problem. No, it was a very loud minority of people in a state that's very, very passionate about Tennessee volunteer football, coupled with, I think, people who are on your side of things, Lucas, who are looking at it and say, how could you look at the production? People are citing age as being a difference for Hendon Hooker and Will Levis when Will Levis is what, a year younger?
That is simply not a factor.
So I think that there's a lot of, again, the geography is what Will Levis is fighting against the most. The biggest, it's not his accuracy, it's not his decision making, it's not his footwork, it's not the style of system he comes from. It's where he got drafted. That's the thing that he's fighting against the most, because there is going to be, no matter how well he does, if he does well on a field of play, there is going to be a segment of the population here in Middle Tennessee, East Tennessee, and probably parts of West Tennessee that are looking at that dude and being like, bleep you. You played at Kentucky. You sucked. And he's talked about that. He's talked about seeing that stuff on social media. Instead of giving us the lame quote, which nobody believes anyways, I don't really pay attention to that stuff. He said the honest thing. Yeah, you can't not see that stuff. He's on Twitter. He's on Instagram, right? You can't not see that stuff. It's just how seriously you're going to take it. How much do you believe? And this, honestly, this is a big question that I would have for any professional athlete, and I don't think I've ever asked it of anybody. Perhaps if we were able to get Will Levis on the radio show, I might ask it of him. I think in any kind of public setting, right? Public performance setting, whether that's sports, whether that's entertainment, whether that's music, you get a lot of criticism, right? Because social media is everywhere. Social media is out there, whether it's Instagram, it's Twitter, it's TikTok, it's Facebook. People can, at any point, say whatever they want to you if you are a public performer in some way. The question becomes, do you believe the people who are telling you you're so bad at your job when all of your life you've been the best of the best? You are the top 1%. In the case of Will Levis, you are the top 1% of college football players. It is even harder to succeed at the NFL level, but you've done the hardest thing. You got there, right? You got there as a high round draft pick. You don't give a bleep about what some dude on his couch or some troll on Twitter says to you about what you think. If you start to believe what people are saying about you, when there's no evidence of that, there are some fair criticisms. There are some constructive criticisms. But people who are outright attacking you based on spite, it takes a degree of, I think, mental compartmentalization to be able to separate that criticism and say, yeah, criticism is a part of the job, versus, like, I'm sure to an extent when these guys start to get exposed to that, or like, say us. Remember how bad people, actually, we really got away with not a lot of heat, to be honest with you, when you and I first got on the air. I mean, we weren't good as a radio show, but obviously, we're on social media. You can say whatever you want to me on the chat. You can say whatever you want to me on Twitter or Instagram DMs. And I'm sure there were people who were saying how bad we were the first couple months that we were on the air. The question is, do you believe them? Or do you say, okay, there's some stuff that I could work on. There's some fair criticisms there, and some of that's just nonsense. I don't care what you have to say. You don't know anything about what we're talking about, or how we do this job, or how to play quarterback at the NFL level, or how to be a lead singer in a band. Like all these different things where there is public performance involved that can bring public scrutiny. So I think for what I'm more curious about the psychology of Will Levis than I am how he's going to pan out, because I know he can be a good football player. All the things about Will Levis tell me that he can be a good football player. The question is, for him and any of these guys, can you get out of your own way? And are you actually able to compartmentalize in a way that allows you to be successful despite all that stuff around you? It turned into a much longer Levis conversation than I thought it was going to be. Either way. 615-737-1045 is the number. Last call for phone calls if you want to weigh in. We will take your phone calls. We will update the polls coming up next. Praise pouring in on social media, as is always the case. We were talking about, performing under pressure, under public scrutiny, within the context of Will Levis. And I knew tendency to make it about us, or at least about me. It's a bad habit, trying to break myself of it. Not really, though. And I said, it was like us when we first started out. We were terrible. And we didn't really, that was an abrupt stop to the music.
It was too wholesome.
Just doesn't match the vibe.
Yeah, it was a mistake.
Anyway, people, I had said, how people were pretty gentle with us, but, I'm sure we got some criticism when we were first on the air a couple of years ago. Lonzo on the F&M Bank chat writes, Lucas is better, but I think Buck has declined.
Like in weight or?
Yeah, let's put it that way. David in Lebanon is next. Hey, David.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Hey, first of all, you guys are great. If I agreed with absolutely everything you said that you always say, I probably wouldn't listen. However, you guys make me think, and I love that about you guys. Actually, all the zone shows. My take on the Will Levis, it has nothing to do with his ability. He is a very, very good quarterback, and maybe will be the best in the world. Who knows? But my thing was watching him on the sidelines during the Music City Bowl, watching his team just get plummeted, and he was there. Okay, now either he opted out or quit. To me, that's the same thing. When you opt out, you quit. He's no longer with the team. Now, you can watch from the stands, but I was a little bit concerned about him getting back home that evening if I were a Kentucky fan, because I just could not believe that. Now, for those, I'm an older generation, so I'm a few generations and eras removed from probably most of your listeners. I don't know. But just old school, old fashioned. So I just, that opting out and stuff, well, I don't want to hurt my investment. Well, wrestling, I understand, because it's a one-on-one sport, but you got to have those other guys on the field to help make you great, is the way I look at it. So you're letting those guys down, and if you were afraid you were going to get hurt, well, you shouldn't have played in the last game that you played in, and you shouldn't have practiced. You can get hurt in practice. I hear it all the time. Professional athletes get hurt in practice. Amateur athletes, which we don't have that many more of now that everybody's getting paid, but you can get hurt in practice. So that means, should you not have even played that year if you were saving up for the NFL, so to speak? I don't know, but keep in mind, that's just my opinion. I'm this old school guy. So I'll hang up and I'll listen to you guys. Love you guys, though. Y'all are great.
Thanks very much for the call, David. We do appreciate it. 60 seconds on the clock for the calls. Opt-outs, I don't think they speak to the individual anymore, although I completely understand a different generation who views that as quitting. We will have a difference of opinion on that. I don't think that impacts the kind of person that they end up being, especially now that it's more commonplace. Fournette was like the first one ahead of this, right? Fournette and McCaffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was that running back, because they were the same class, I believe.
They were right around each other.
Yeah, around then. And also keep in mind the perspective of a Mark Stoops. And I don't know that this happened, but Mark Stoops could very well sit Will Levis down and say, listen, you're coming off an injury. To be honest, you're more valuable to this program as a top 10 pick at the time. He's projected as a top 10 pick than you are as somebody that won us a Music City Bowl when it comes to recruiting moving forward.
And just to be clear, we're not saying that those conversations happen.
No.
We are saying that those conversations happen. We're saying specifically we don't know that this conversation between Stoops and Levis has happened. I think all Lucas is trying to say is you don't have access to all the information.
Yeah.
Right? There are a variety of different conversations that go into that, both with coaches, parents, family, agents, and then the player's decision himself.
Yeah, so go be a highly drafted quarterback that we can use in recruiting for years to come, and we'll find out what we have in four-star quarterback Destin Wade playing in his hometown.
And of all the bowl games to opt out on, I'm not going to get pissed at him if he's opted out of the Music City Bowl. Polls.
Oh, I wasn't ready.
Zoinks like, hey, Scoop, stop the count, stop the count.
Yeah.
The polls have closed. The votes are in. It's time for a poll update, Scoop.
A poll update? Yeah.
Zoink Scoop. Here's Buck Rising Show daily correspondent Lucas Panzica. Lucas Panzica? Yeah.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, who sells below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford. Vibe check. How should Titans fans feel about Caleb Farley as he heads into year 3? Canadian Titans says cautiously optimistic. He still has the potential he was drafted for, and hopefully Chris Harris can unlock it.
I don't care about potential. He's a non-factor until he is. And through 2 years as an NFL player, again, his body failing him is not his fault, but he is a non-factor as far as I'm concerned. He has the most to prove of anybody on this roster, and I think that includes Treylon Burks, Malik Willis, or any of these other names who you have questions about.
Yeah, Dave says 0 expectations. Gary says anything he contributes on the field is a bonus. I mean, this is it, right? This is the year for Caleb Farley to show whether or not he can be on an NFL or should remain a Tennessee Titan.
Yes.
What is Deion Sanders' ceiling at Colorado? We did not really get to this today. Brian says a bowl game. DW says, I really think he's going to contend for championships. Bones says 8 wins.
He's not going to be there long enough to contend for championships. This whole turn and burn thing, he's basically flipping houses. That's what he's doing with college football programs. The prime effect. We're going to spend a lot of time on this tomorrow. Barrett Salih is also going to join us from SEC, not media days, but SEC meetings in Destin. I'd be curious to get Barrett's take on this too, because Deion's getting a lot of heat from other college coaches. He doesn't seem to care. He doesn't seem to care that 50 players are in the portal. He doesn't seem to care that he's losing recruits. And he doesn't seem to care that he's got an absolutely ungodly schedule ahead of him this year.
Where does DeAndre Hopkins end up? The Bills, the Chiefs, or the field? 58% give it to the field. 22% say the Chiefs. 20% say the Bills.
I'd say the field. Just by percentage, I'd say the field, especially since, Kansas City and Buffalo have restricted finances, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow as well.
What was your reaction to the Preds firing John Hines for Andrew Brunette? Mahogany says, about time. Karen says, interesting.
Mine was who?
Mine was the timing of it. That was the weirdest thing for me.
Yeah, we did. We talked a little bit about the timing of it because, and I just don't know enough about the hockey offseason calendar to know what might have been missed. Would it have been more beneficial for Andrew Brunette to be here a month ago as opposed to, obviously their season just ended a month ago, but.
Well, if anything, for John Hines' sake and his the staff members that did get fired, not all of them have been officially let go yet, but if you know you're going to make a change, just make a change. Yeah. Don't let John Hines think that he's going to be the head coach of the Nashville Predators until late May when you fire him.
Well, the question that I would have at this press conference that apparently David Poyle is going to be a part of here in just a second is whose call was it to wait? Was it Poyle's or was it Trotz's? Because I bet you're going to be dealing with a lot of that for people who are actually paying attention to those things.
I hope that is a question that they field. It'll be Trotz, Poyle, and Brunette himself will be up there.
Who besides Alex is left at these things to ask questions?
Well, Titans OTAs are going on, so you got a bunch of TV people probably at Titans practice. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what that
Teresa, anybody who's covering the Preds is probably at Titans today.
Yeah, Glennon. Yeah. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. What is the most interesting OTA storyline in the NFL outside of the Titans? Brian says if Ryan Tannehill gets traded, which is very much having to do with the Titans. Ricky says DeAndre Hopkins, which doesn't really have anything to do with OTAs. Kane fan says Jimmy G's foot. Kenneth also says what happens with the Raiders and Jimmy G. The most likely scenario is probably the foot heals up and he's there at training camp, right?
Yeah, Garoppolo recency bias just because it's in the news cycle this week. I think it's still Rodgers. Just generally.
Just Rodgers said. Did you see, they were talking about this on Get Up this morning, the video of him. They're making a big deal that he was at the Taylor Swift concert at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah.
And he was there with Miles Teller and Miles Teller's girlfriend. But the video that he took is confetti's falling, I guess, after the conference. And Rodgers took a selfie video saying, "Oh, the Jets win the Super Bowl."
Oh, no.
yeah, with the confetti falling.
I love that he's a god.
He was pretending like he was doing a Jets Super Bowl celebration.
It's either going to be really, really good or really, really bad in New York. And I love that it has to be either.
He was speaking it into existence.
No in between.
Those are the polls.
That is the show. I'm off to Titans practice. Blaine and Mickey got you the rest of the afternoon. They'll carry the press conferences for you. They'll keep you updated with the Pred stuff, too. Talk to you about what happened at OTAs tonight on Prime Time. And then if I don't catch you there, radio show at 10 a.m. tomorrow. See you guys.